So, welcome back to another episode. I was talking to a friend recently, and it got me thinking. This friend just recently graduated high school, is starting that next chapter of life, getting into college. And it's a weird space that I remember being in at one point, about 10 years ago. And high school is this unique bubble, right? It's a world that's kind of locked down. It's unique to that specific time. And I think we all have those, right? But it's a little more dramatized in high school. It's a little more obvious in high school. Everything is structured. You know what you're supposed to do. You know when to show up. You go to class, you take a test, you move on, you do your sports, you do your whatever class you're going to be in, you do your extracurriculars. All your friends are there for the most part. But then you graduate and suddenly that structure disappears. And a lot of my friends who are at that stage right now, I've got several friends, a couple athletes I work with, they're trying to figure out what comes next. What are they going to do with their life? I think there is a real anxiety underneath it all. This fear of being confused, of wandering, or of not knowing. And it seems to be a reoccurring pattern that I see and in conversations I have. And they keep saying this to me, and this was the specific conversation we were having. They said, I got to figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I remember being at that age and remember feeling that exact same way. The weight of I have to get this right. I have to have a plan. I have to know what I'm going to do and what I'm going to be doing. But here's what I want to tell you, and here's what I've been really thinking about. Whether you're at the stage right now or you're past it, you're still carrying that anxiety. That whole narrative is a lie, in my opinion. It's a well intentioned lie, but it's still a lie. This idea that you have to have it all figured out. And once I've came to understand that, or once I came to that realization, I feel like everything changed for me. And sometimes I still have to remind myself of that, but it still made the switch. Think about what the world tells you, and this is what I'm hinting at. Think about what it tells you when you're graduating high school or you're moving on from that chapter. Your parents say it, you need to figure out what you're going to do, you need to have a plan. Your teachers tell you, start thinking about your future. What are your goals? And your friends are all saying it too. I'm going to study this, or I'm going to do that, or I've got it all figured out. I'm going to head into pro sports. That's my goal, right? I'm going to go do college and then go to the next phase. And some people have that mapped out. Some people really, that's their path, but I think that's more rare. And the narrative is so consistent, right? Coming from so many different directions. Going back to the athlete, even if you go into college sports, you may only play college, maybe you don't go pro, or even you go pro, eventually you go on to the next chapter from that. So I think it all still applies. And in my opinion, this narrative, this idea is so consistent coming from so many different directions that it's almost impossible not to internalize it, right? It's almost impossible not to hear it. You start telling it to yourself, truthfully, I need to have this all figured out. I need to know what I'm going to do. I need to have a plan for the rest of my life. It's hard not to make it something personal. It's hard not to start telling yourself that, because when you hear everybody around you saying that, what else are you supposed to believe, right? We are so heavily influenced by our surroundings and by the people we associate with and what they say. It's hard not to start to take on that mindset. And here's what happens when you do start to believe that narrative. You get paralyzed, right? Because the weight of figuring out your whole life is crushing. There's no way it's not. I mean, if you're 20 years old, that's what, 60, 70 years, maybe? That puts you at 90 when you die. Hopefully if you run your cards right, you're living that long. But that's at least 50 years of trying to plan out. It's impossible. I mean, most of us can barely plan our week, our month, our year. I mean, how are you supposed to plan 50 years into the future? How are you supposed to plan and map out what you want for the rest of your life? At this point, you have maybe 20 years of experience. You're trying to base 50 years of planning off of. It's just impossible. There's no way to do it. And so you become paralyzed because the way to figuring it out is going to crush you. It's too big. So you get paralyzed, or the other option is you pick something or anything because you think you have to have that answer, and then you lock yourself into it. And this can be through a few avenues, right? You could lock yourself into doing it as, it just was available and you start doing it and it's hard to leave because you're scared because you don't really know what you want, or you decide to make an identity out of it because you see your friends and your peers and your relatives who seem to have it figured out, seem to have their path, right? And that's the hard part, is it's really easy to see everybody else online or in your groups that put on a good face and maybe aren't telling the truth, because it's not something we talk about openly, about not having it figured out, because that's scary. That's something we don't want to let out, right? We want people to perceive us as having it together. And so we base it off that. And because we need an identity, because we need to know who we are, we need to feel like we have it figured out. We then decide, right, to identify with the thing we picked, the thing that just came along, or the anything we could think of. And once you lock yourself into that, you start to build pathways in your mind of why this is the right choice, why this idea was exactly what I should do. And here's what I've learned, and this is what I really want you to hear. I'm more than 10 years past that phase. I haven't got it all figured out, but I've built several businesses. I've led a national program, international program actually. I've coached lots of athletes. I've written a book. I've done a lot of different things. Through those different iterations of what I do and who I am, I still don't have it figured out. I still don't know what I'm going to do the rest of my life. In fact, if you talk to my wife, I probably don't even know what I'm going to do the rest of this week or this next month. Mostly joking there, but in reality, I don't have it all figured out. And as I really think about it, I don't think that's a failure. I think that's actually how it's supposed to work. Every time I do something new, every time I accomplish something new, or I've started a new chapter, I figure out a new version of myself. I learn what I like. I learn what I don't like. I discover capabilities I didn't even know I had. And truthfully, I hit a lot of walls I didn't expect to hit. I've had several times where I've had to kind of rebuild myself up from the ground. And it sucks at times. You kind of go, man, I have to do this again. But there's a whole new iteration of things you learn. And there's a whole slew of information you've gained from the last experience that you apply to it. And you're a little bit wiser. You're also sometimes a little bit more timid at times, and you have to check yourself because you have experiences that are kind of influencing your choices, and you have to really check yourself on those at times. But nonetheless, you change, right? And you learn, and all of it becomes the input for the next thing. So when people younger than me or people ask me, what should I do with my life? The honest answer is, I don't know. And the truth is, neither do you. And that is honestly okay. What you can do, in my opinion, is take the next step. Pick something that interests you. Try it out. See what happens. Learn from it. And then pick the next thing based on what you learn. That's kind of the process. That's how it works. And people will get lost or paralyzed because they feel like that's wandering, but it's not. That's not wandering. That's actually how you find your path. You don't plan from the top down, you build it as you go. And that's what I'm trying to tell you here. It's a journey. It's not all figured out at once. Now, here's what I do want to be careful of, because I know there is a response to what I just said. People are going to say, okay, but you can't just do nothing. You can't just float around being confused forever, and you have to commit to something. Otherwise, you get nowhere. And I agree. That is true. And they are completely right. You do have to commit to something. You can't just sit idle because you're afraid to make the wrong choice. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. They get to that paralyzed phase and they just wait. They wait and wait. And they're hoping somebody will come around and tell them what to do. Somebody will give them the indication that the ideas they have in their mind that they're too scared to pursue, or they have too many, that one of them's right. And sometimes that does happen. Sometimes you have a good mentor or a good family member who maybe guide you, but you have to make the choice, right? You still have to commit. Here's where I think the distinction is, right? Committing to something doesn't mean locking yourself into forever, right? Let's go back to that first one, right? You could get paralyzed, or you might just pick something, but you don't have to make it your identity, right? You can commit to something and say, I'm going to try this out and I'm going to give it my full effort. And that's the key differentiator, right? Commitment is meaning you're going to give it your full effort. You're going to do it. You're going to be honest about it. You're going to try your hardest, and then you're going to adapt. The mistake is thinking that there's a wrong choice, that if you pick the wrong major, or you pick the wrong job, or you pick the wrong path, you've somehow failed and that you're stuck. And I think that's where people get paralyzed, and they also lock themselves in. One, because they don't want to seem like they made the wrong choice. And that's what you got to realize, is there is no wrong choice. You're just figuring it out. That's what everyone does. And at the same time, if you're paralyzed, you got to realize there is no wrong direction. You're just, once again, figuring it out. And it's part of that learning process. And that's the switch, right? You're not stuck, you're learning. That's what I want you to think about. Every experience is going to teach you something about what you like, what you don't like. Every job shows what kind of a work environment you deal best in, how you work with people. And every relationship is going to teach you what you value and what other people value. And that is good. Like that's the baseline of information you need to start making choices and start identifying who you are. I think that's one of the most unfortunate things about nowadays is we are scared to find out who we really are. We're scared to take time with ourselves and ask the hard questions. And I think that's a lot of times because of the world we're living in. How much quiet time do you really have in your day other than sleeping? Wake up, get on your phone, get a phone call, get a text, look at social media, go work out if you do that, start your job, right? How much time are we spending to really understand who we are and ask ourselves the question? Doing an internal audit of ourselves and really finding out who we are, what we like, what we don't like, and where we're headed. And the best thing, in my opinion, is when you don't know, you don't have answers to those questions, just try. Look at what you have available to you. If you take the time, I guarantee you can find opportunities available to you, whether that's through family, through friends, and then ask yourself, is this something that interests me? If the answer is yes, then go do it, right? Commit to it, try it out, find out what you like and don't like, and then learn and adapt. And that's how you really start to build a baseline to make choices and find things that you like. I've talked to a lot of people about this on the podcast, in coaching conversations, and just in life and notice in general. And what I've noticed is there's a pattern. The people who have the most regret typically are the ones who lock themselves into one specific linear thing because they thought it was what they were supposed to do. And they picked a college major and never questioned it, or they took that job in a certain industry and never explored anything else. And they did commit to a path, but it was because they were afraid to admit they weren't sure or admit that they didn't know what they really wanted to do. And then 10 years later or 20 years later, they look back and I think, man, and they think, I wish I would have tried other things. I wish I would have branched out, or I wish I would have been brave enough to not know, or I wish I would have tried that random job that popped up and I just was too scared to take because I thought it was a waste of time. Because being willing to not know, being willing to explore and try things, to fail, to learn is actually the brave thing. And I know that seems kind of contradictory, seems, counterintuitive, but I've always said sometimes the most secure thing you can say is, I don't know. And we're scared to do that at times. The people who don't regret it, what I've found in these conversations, are the ones who tried different things, who were willing to fail, who learned as they went, who took that leap and just gave it their all. And they kept moving toward what actually resonated with them instead of what they thought they were supposed to do. Now, the one other thing I want to address in this, and I think it's important, there's this idea that you're supposed to find your passion, because this is where the conversation, they go hand in hand, and it comes up quite a bit. Find your passion, find what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before. Your one true calling's out there. You just have to discover it. And the challenge I have is I also think that's a little bit of a lie. It's a nice lie. It sounds really good, but passions aren't static. They change, they evolve. What you're passionate about at 20 is going to be different than what you're passionate about at 30 or 40 or 50. It's going to change. And that's not failure. Like that's just growing. That's a part of life. Plus, and I think this is important, there are always aspects of what you're going to do that you won't end up liking. And I don't think people realize that because they get trapped into thinking there's this mystery thing out there that there's this one imaginary job or role or task where everything's so much fun and it's so engaging and I'll never feel burdened at all and I'll never feel like I have to work. And like that doesn't exist. I hate to break it to you. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that doesn't exist. You're looking for something that it's not there. And you're wasting your time trying to avoid the things you don't like. When in reality, everything you do has parts you love and parts you hate. And the truth is the only reason that it becomes something you like is because you do it long enough that you either learn to tolerate it or you learn to like it because you're good at it now. Because generally the reason we hate something or the reason we don't like it is because it's hard, and it's hard because we're not good at it. And the only way you become good at it is by doing it more. And so, you think of people, maybe you're a comedian. There's plenty of comedians who will actively say they don't like having to write, but they force themselves to write and then they love to perform, right? There's always an aspect to it. So yeah, that's just the harsh reality, is realizing that at the end of the day, there really is no perfect thing out there. There is always going to be aspects of what you do that you're going to dislike. And that's part of the process. That's part of dealing with it. And as I was mentioning before, a lot of the athletes I work with, they love playing the game. They love, specifically basketball is what I'm speaking of, but they love to compete. They love to play the game. They love game day. They love to be in that moment. But it's rare to find somebody who loves to practice, who loves to show up day in and day out and shoot the extra hoops, who loves to be there running suicides or getting in shape. Like that's the part that leads to the fun part, right? That to the competition that they love, but it requires something that maybe they don't enjoy nearly as much. And so I think there's this false idea that some of us are hoping we're going to find this utopia where everything's perfect and everything's great. And truthfully, like that's what the next life's for, right? That's after we finish here, right? That's after we're done putting in the work here. That's what this is life's for. It's for working, for not suffering, but struggling to grow, right? Growth is not always comfortable. It's usually painful because it requires us to stretch and become something different than what we currently are. And the best way to manage some of those growing pains, as people put it, is to accept that they're part of the process. Because the only thing, in my opinion, that can make things worse when you're dealing with growing pains is fighting against them, right? It's like you're in the middle of puberty trying to get taller and your body's already going through those growth pains. So then you try to fight it and actually be shorter, right? It's like the tall girl who's already tall and she's getting a little bit taller, but she's embarrassed because all her friends are short. And so she tries to like slump and have bad posture. The only thing that's like doing damage is that like she's just affecting herself more, right? She's actually causing more damage. One, she doesn't look very confident, right? Because she's kind of hiding. She's not being her best self. She's not accepting who she is. And on top of that, she's probably causing more long-term damage from slouching and having bad posture than just accepting that she's growing and she's a bit taller than everybody else. So the only thing that amplifies the pain of growth is our unwillingness to accept that it's coming and it's that it's there. And the best thing we can do is accept that it's there, accept that life is changing and that growth is coming and it's pushing us in a good direction, hopefully, and ride the wave, right? Try to make the most of it and get the most out of that growth. Because if you can, I guarantee you'll be in a better spot than you were before. That's the whole point. And so for everyone trying to figure out what their next phase is, what their life is supposed to bring, what they're supposed to do for the rest of their life, I hear that all the time. And I think what an unfortunate statement that somebody has bought into this idea that you're going to solve all your plans for the rest of your life. And I know they don't mean that at the top level, but deep down, that's what they think. That's what they're thinking. What they're saying is what they believe. And I just think it's an unfortunate place to be because you kind of set yourself up for failure leading into the future. So I want to leave you with an actual framework before we end here today, because I hate just giving off ideas and not leaving you with something to actually do. The first thing, and this is the framework for figuring it out. So if you're starting out, if you're in this next chapter, you're leaving high school, or maybe you're even a little bit older and you've just finished one chapter of your life and it seems to be closing or it's setting, as one might say, and you're starting a new, fresh chapter, here's what you can do. First, get clear on your values, not your goals, but your values. What matters to you? What kind of person do you want to be? What do you care about? And this doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as I value growth, or I value my autonomy. Maybe I want my freedom. I value having an impact on people. It's one of the main reasons I do this podcast because I really value impact. Money's important. I get it. It helps you survive and live and do, and it's important. But for me, it's always been about impact. I want to help people. I want to impact. And so maybe that's my value, right? So then I have to decide what helps me reach that value. And sometimes our values need to change depending on the circumstance, but you really need to ask yourself that. What do you value? Second, pick something that aligns with those values and do it. Don't overthink it. Don't try to pick the perfect thing. Don't pick apart what you value. Just pick something that seems interesting and go all in on it. Make it happen and give it real effort. Because you'll find out real quick. Like if you have something that you value and you pick something and then it's not really aligning with those values, or it doesn't feel like a good fit, and don't just rush to it, right? If you suck at it, like if I wanted to be a pro basketball player, I love coaching, I love playing the game, but I'm probably a better coach than I am an actual like player. But if I wanted to go play, I got to realize that there is a steep line of talent between me and the top, and that's going to be one heck of a climb. And if I'm okay with that, if I accept that because that's what I value, I can get through that. But don't realize that going in, and don't just quit because, oh, it's hard, right? That's sometimes where we get tripped up. So pick something, try it, don't overthink it, and give it your full effort. Third, while you're doing it, really pay attention to what are you learning about yourself, what energizes you, what drains you, what are you good at and you didn't know that you're good at, and what are you struggling with in the process? What things maybe aren't really meshing with who you are and aren't your strengths. Then, fourth, let that learning inform what you do next. You don't have to stay in the thing forever, right? But while you're there, be fully there, commit to it, and learn from it. Start to pull things apart. And now that you have that information, you've informed yourself of what works for you, what you got from the experience. This is the last piece, and I think it's key to every aspect of life, is repeat. Pick that next thing based on what you learned and keep moving toward who you want to be and what actually resonates with you. And sometimes people get tripped up here thinking, oh, well, I just need to uproot my whole life, everything I just did, and change gears. And I would tell you the answer to that isn't always as extreme. Sometimes it's as simple as maybe moving positions within your work, maybe asking for a raise, maybe switching departments in your career. Maybe it's going to a different school. Maybe it's changing your major. Maybe it's, you could say this for anything. Maybe it's staying in your current job, but trying to allocate time outside of it to start that side hustle or that side business and seeing where that goes, right? Seeing where that entrepreneurship fuels you up and finding out what works and doesn't work. And I guarantee you'll probably apply things that you learned at that other job into that business. So that's what really counts. Follow that cycle. And once again, it is exactly that. It's a cycle. It's a cycle of growth that leads you on the journey of life that makes you who you will become and gets you to where you want to go. And you'll find and you'll learn so much more about yourself. You'll be a lot happier because you explored and you tried the things that you wanted to try. So hopefully you don't live with regrets, right? Who wants to be, 80 years old looking back, wishing they would have done all these things? Don't live that life. Don't try to build it all from the top. Realize that sometimes life doesn't always have a perfect plan. And I guarantee you'll find a lot of growth and you'll become the person you want to become. And you'll also find a lot of enjoyment while you do it. I hope this helps. I'll catch you guys next time.